Welcome to Litbit channel. Today we will see Martin Luther King by Coretta S.king. Let's we see the short answers. Why was Rosa Parks arrested? Mrs. Rosa Parks, a 42 years old woman, was returning home after tying work on December 1, 1955. As she was feeling tired, she boarded a bus and sat in a seat at the beginning of the black people row. More people get into the bus and the driver ordered her to get up to give a seat for the white. Due to her tiredness, she refused to get up and it was considered as an unlawful incident. Due to it, she was arrested and produced in the court. Later, she was fined $10 and her lawyer filed for an appeal. This was the first case filed against a black for disobeying the law. How did the black react to the arrest of Rosa Parks? The news of Miss Rosa Parks' arrest had spread around the city. Every black thought that they had suffered a lot under white discrimination and that was a time to end segregation. All the black ministers and civil leaders had a meeting regarding this issue at Martin Luther King's church. In the meeting, they have decided to boycott the bus service on 5th December 1955. Leaflets were circulated to convey about the boycott to the black people. On December 5th, Martin Luther King was very anxious to know the response for the boycott from his own people. He, along with his wife and friend Ralph Abernethy, traveled around the city to check the response of the people for the boycott. Almost all the buses were empty except a few whites and one or two blacks. How did the black travel after they boycotted the city bus? On December 5th, Martin Luther was very anxious to know the response for the boycott from his own people. He, along with his wife and friends Ralph Abernethy, traveled along the city to check the response of the people for the boycott. Almost all the buses were empty except a few whites and one or two blacks. They traveled by boycotting the bus service, traveled by various modes. Most of the men and women were walking to their work, and students were going by walk, or many were gathered together and traveled by taxi. Some were riding mules and horse. An old lady said that her heart felt tired due to discrimination, but now, through her legs are paining, she feels happy. Let's we see the 4 mark. Describe some of the difficulty faced by the blacks in their year-long boycott of buses. The blacks, by boycotting the bus service, traveled by various modes. Most of the men and women were walking to their work, and students were going by walk, or many were gathered together and traveled by taxi. Some were riding mules and horse. An old lady said that her heart felt tired due to the discrimination, but now through her legs are paining, she feels happy. Due to the intensity of the boycott, Martin started reversing threat calls. He was arrested on false charges on 13th January 1956. When Martin was addressing the public in the church, his house was bombed. The white police were nervous by thinking the reaction of the blacks, but Martin said that his family was safe. Violence should not be met with any non-violence. He quoted Jay's words and followed Gandhian principles. The incident showed Martin as a potential leader. Later in the month of Feb 1956, when Martin went out the town with his wives, a case was filed against Martin and 90 other leaders of his movement. His lawyer applied in the federal court and the court dismissed the case as segregation as unlawful on 6th May 1956. The whites filed appeal for in the US Supreme Court. For many months the boycott was continuing. The people had a tough life during bad weathers. On November 13th, when Martin was in court for the judgment, the court announced the judgment of the Supreme Court that segregation as an unlawful act. What was the 1956 Christmas present referred to by the author? In the month of Feb 1956, when Martin went out the town with his wife, a case was filed against Martin and 90 other leaders of his movement. His lawyer appealed into the federal court, and the court dismissed the case as segregation as unlawful on 6th May 1956. The whites filed appeal for the USA Supreme Court. For many months, the boycott was continuing. The people had tough life during bad weathers. On November 13, when Martin was in court for the judgment, the court announced the judgment of the Supreme Court that segregation as an unlawful act. The court ordered that stated segregation as an unlawful act react them on 20th December 1956. It was considered as a great Christmas presents for the blacks. The next morning, a group of members gathered at Martin House. They all traveled in the first desegregation bus, and the whole day Martin traveled in different buses to check the rights of the black. Thus, desegregation in Montgomery was achieved without losing a single life.
இந்த வீடியோ உங்களுக்கு பிடிச்சிருந்தா மறக்காம லைக் பண்ணுங்கள், ஷேர் பண்ணுங்கள், கமெண்ட் பண்ணுங்கள், சப்ஸ்கிரைப் பண்ணி கூட இருக்க பெல் ஐக்கனையும் ப்ரெஸ் பண்ணுங்கள். தேங்க்யூ ஃபார் வாட்சிங்.